Good evening. I'm Diana Tuite, Katz Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Colby College Museum of Art. On behalf of the museum staff and our Maine-based presenters, I acknowledge our presence on unceded Wabanaki land. We express our respect to the Indigenous communities who have lived on these ancestral lands for almost 15,000 years, and to the future generations. We recognize the legacies of settler colonialism and make an ongoing commitment to building relationships with the Maliseet, Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki peoples. The exhibition Bob Thompson, This House is Mine, is currently on view here at Colby and will travel to Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. This exhibition surveys the all too brief but extraordinary career of an American artist who died at the age of 28 in 1966. Bob Thompson was someone with a boundless imagination, someone capable of profound reimagining. When I conceived of this project, it was important that it advance alternative visions. This meant inviting staff at the Brooklyn Museum to contribute a catalog essay about their collaboration with Project Reset. You'll hear more about this. I want to thank Craig Blue, Ajwa Jones de Almeida, and Mónica Mariño, who's here tonight, for their thoughtful and orienting reflection on using Thompson's work in their curriculum. Freedom, judgment, and captivity are recurring themes in the exhibition, and tonight's panelists are catalysts for social change in these areas. Maine Youth Justice and Maine Inside Out are leading calls for the closure of Long Creek Youth Development Center, the last youth prison in our state. Through their pedagogy and activism, tonight's generous speakers center art within new therapeutic realities, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from them this evening. I'll turn things over to my colleague, Kris Bergquist.
Thank you so much, Diana. So our program tonight is part of the Art and series for the 2021-22 academic year. And these programs bring together visiting artists, scholars, museum staff, and community experts for conversations about exhibitions, collections, and projects at the Colby College Museum of Art and its Lunder Institute for American Art. These programs are going to be a mix of in-person, hybrid, or virtual, like this one, designed for anyone who is interested in learning more about art and the key issues of our times. So tonight, as Diana said, we're going to hear from artists, educators, and community activists who are involved in arts-based approaches to social justice, particularly in the realm of criminal justice programming. We'll hear about Project Reset, a diversion program based in the New York City area in which participants attend an arts program as an alternative to appearing in court. And one of the works at the heart of that program is a painting by Bob Thompson, currently on view at the museum, called The Judgment, which according to the essay in the exhibition catalog was intentionally chosen for its potential to spark dialogue around themes of divine and earthly justice and injustice. We'll also be hearing from leaders of Maine Inside Out, an arts organization that works to build movement for transformative justice in this state of Maine, particularly on issues related to the criminal justice system. So to our virtual audience, I just want to thank you again for being with us tonight. And I just invite you to take a deep, relaxing breath and get comfortable as we enter into this conversation together. As questions come to you, please submit them using the Q&A tab, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And if you need closed captioning, you also can find that at the bottom right of your screen. So I'm going to begin now with the Project Reset program. And I'm pleased to introduce the speakers tonight. Lindsay C. Harris, a Brooklyn-based artist, social justice advocate, cultural worker, and educator. They collaborate with fierce young people full-time as the teen programs manager and interim director of education at Brooklyn Museum. Lindsay is committed to increasing meaningful civic engagement through the arts, challenging inequity, and amplifying youth voice, specifically femme, queer, and trans youth of color in cultural programming locally and globally. Mónica Mariño, Adult Learning Manager at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, has dedicated her career to making art museums accessible to a wide range of audiences for 20 years. Currently, she's an adjunct instructor at Pratt Institute and the manager of adult learning at the Brooklyn Museum, where she oversees learning programs to create institutional pathways for adults, including the Court Diversion Program for Adults, Project Reset. Sadiq Newton-Boyd is the Community Affairs Manager at Brooklyn Justice Initiatives, a project of the Center for Court Innovation. And CCI seeks to create a fair, effective, and humane justice system, and seeks to minimize the harms of court involvement and unnecessary incarceration or detention by providing judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys with alternative options. During Sadiq's tenure with CCI, he served as program manager for Project Reset. And Sophia Dawson is an art educator with the Project Reset program at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. She also has served as the director of art and entrepreneur program with Artistic Noise, and she has had one-person exhibitions at the Langston Hughes Community Library, Rush Art Gallery, OK Space, and has been part of group exhibitions at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Bronx Museums of the Arts. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your Project Reset work with all of us. And I'm going to let you, please continue. Take it away. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before I do a brief screen share, I wanted to introduce myself again quickly. My name is Sadiq Newton-Boyd. I'm the Community Affairs Manager here at Brooklyn Justice Initiatives, which is a project of the Center for Court Innovation. And I am here to tell you a little bit about our program Project Reset and our collaboration with the Brooklyn Museum and lifting this art-based diversion program. So I'm going to share my screen, but I am honored to be here with you this afternoon, this evening, and to share in this space with you all today virtually. And to begin, with the Center for Court Innovation, we are a nonprofit based primarily in New York City, but essentially our essential mission is to create an effective and humane justice system. And so we do that through a number of different ways, and we seek to work with system actors, district attorneys' offices, judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, in order to create alternative forms of justice. So that way we are able to avoid unnecessary incarceration, and we do that work both nationally and internationally, and assist other jurisdictions with lifting their own reform efforts. A big part of our work is diversion. And so what we seek to do, particularly with the program Project Reset, which does serve as a pre-court diversion from the traditional process. So individuals that are arrested for low-level offenses, they are referred by the district attorney's office to Project Reset or the Center for Court Innovation. And we seek to work with community-based organizations, cultural institutions like the Brooklyn Museum in order to initiate an alternative form of justice. And so what our desire was to kind of show the community and system is that we're not business as usual. We look at justice and think that it has to happen in one way. It ends with a sentence or incarceration. But through the work, we're able to show that we can be effective. We can use art as a healing tool. And a part of our initial conversations with the Brooklyn Museum was a desire to really build the context to the work. And so we invited our teaching artists as well as the educators as well that you'll hear from today to the office, to our courthouse. And so that way they're able to see essentially the environment that our both youth and adults walk into, their interactions with their attorneys, the court officers, with the judge, and talk about how potentially art can be a disruption to those oppressive spaces. And that was important for us to lead with in the work with doing Project Reset and build the context to the magic that would happen or take place at the museum. And we do seek to pull in unconventional partnerships. And so we also offer therapeutic or clinical services to our participants, but wanting to have a wide range of different offerings and use art as a healing tool and as a way to have further dialogue and discussions around system involvement with our own experiences. And thankfully, we've been able to work with our district attorney's office as well as our public defender agencies here in New York to be able to do that and have the support to initiate arts-based programming with Project Reset. Now I wanted to give a little bit about how the program works and a bit about the mechanics of it. And so we'll start out with an initial arrest. An individual as young as 18 years old will arrested for a low-level offense. Normally what we'll see are things around, sometimes it might be shoplifting, graffiti, trespassing, things of that nature, and an officer will issue what's called a desk appearance ticket, which will include a date that that individual will have to appear in court. From that point, the district attorney will review each case and they will determine eligibility for Project Reset, and they would refer the case to the Center for Court Innovation, where we will be able to conduct outreach to that individual, conduct an intake and needs assessment to get a sense on if there are any particular housing needs, employment, vocational interests, or other areas that they may need additional support in. And from there, we would schedule them to complete programming at the Brooklyn Museum. And this is a one-time session. And so participants that complete successfully will have, the DA's office has agreed to decline to prosecute their case, meaning that they do not have to appear in court and they will receive no criminal record for their case. And what we're looking to intentionally do through this process is to avoid a lot of the collateral consequences involved in that's associated with court involvement. So we're looking at consequences around immigration status, housing, employment. A lot of these things end up disrupted due to system involvement, due to multiple court dates. And we're looking to have an intervention at the earliest point possible in order to avoid someone even coming into the courthouse. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay Harris to chat a little bit more about the work at the Brooklyn Museum and youth programming.
Yes, thank you so much, Sadiq. And thank you again for just hosting us. Excited to be here and share a little bit more about this work. My name is Lindsay. Once again, I am the Interim Director of Education at Brooklyn Museum. I've been at Brooklyn Museum for almost 7 years, and up until a couple months ago had specifically been supporting our teen programming. And so that's a bit of my entry point into this work, is really thinking about young people in their teen and early adult years and how to cultivate experiences of transformation within the museum. Sadiq, we can see your emails. It happens. It's okay. Yeah, as we're all shifting, adjusting to, what it means to even just be on Zoom here. I'm actually at the Brooklyn Museum right now too. I'm in my office just to give some context. So, Sadiq, are you able to bring back up the screen share, or would you want me to do it? Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Sadiq. So we can see an image of Brooklyn Museum on the right. And so just to give some context, for those who haven't been to New York City, haven't been to Brooklyn, we are an encyclopedic art museum with artwork from antiquity to present and all over the world. And we, in terms of our education division, I believe we are a leader in experimental, culturally responsive pedagogy and transformative arts education in museums. The mission is to create inspiring encounters with art that expand the ways we see ourselves, the world, and its possibilities. And so there's been a long legacy of folks within the museum who've been thinking a lot about the intersections of art and social justice. And so in 2018, as We just heard more about from Sadiq, all of the expansiveness of Project Reset. That was a really critical point where Brooklyn became, the first borough at that time where all individuals who received a disappearance ticket were eligible, even with prior contacts with the criminal legal system. And so they sought a partnership with the Brooklyn Museum, and we were super eager to be able to collaborate in this way, to hope to expand the amount of people that would be able to be served through this powerful program at the museum. And that very much aligned a lot with our own values and thinking about, activating arts as a vehicle for greater social justice. And we're especially interested in thinking about how we can reimagining how individuals and communities use museum spaces in their daily lives, and how to both transform the museum space through that process and also disrupt traditional pipelines into the criminal justice system. We, also to shout out just in terms of this partnership that originally started and began more formally in 2019. Adra Jones de Almeida, our current Deputy Director for Learning and Social Impacts, as was mentioned earlier, is really critical in cultivating this partnership. And then also Catherine Kuziak-Carey, our Education Administration and Special Projects Coordinator, have also been a really incredible support. So along with Mónica, who will be sharing in a moment, and then our teaching artist, Sophia, and Craig Blue, who's also not here. This is kind of the core Brooklyn Museum team that have implemented this work. So just really quickly, the next slide, just want to share that as I said, we started this in the summer of 2019, and the partnership allowed us as an opportunity to activate the power of art to transform the challenges we face as individuals and society as a whole. And so we started with a larger training process, and then there were two artists that had been previously connected with Project Reset and Center for Court Innovation and some of the other pilot programs previous to that, Derek Serger and Sean Leonardo, who were really critical to this work. And so here you can see an image of Sean in the galleries during one of our sessions over the summer as we were doing this kind of more intensive training. Sadiq had mentioned, right, that, we went into Brooklyn Justice Initiatives, we went into Courthouse, right? So really thinking about how to bridge these two institutions and thinking about how we can have structure these sessions. So the last thing I'll say is that then fall 2019, we started with 2 sessions bi-weekly, one for ages 18 to 25, led by Sophia Dawson, we'll talk in a moment, and then one for ages 26 plus that was led by artist Craig Blue that Mónica will speak about. This was also the first time, especially that the age was expanded in Project Reset to offer arts-based programming to adults over 25, ages 25 and up. All right, I'll pass it over to Mónica.
Thank you, Lindsay. And also thank you, Kristen, for inviting us to join today. And thank you, Diana, for inviting us to make this connection and to the exhibition to write something on behalf of the voices of our participants in the exhibition catalog. So this is the work of art that we chose, The Judgment. And as Diana mentioned, we chose this work, Blue, our teaching artist, chose this work, purposefully to make connections to the idea of, who can be judged, who's doing the judging, who's being judged, and that it is open-ended, and also, that it was created by an African-American, a Black American artist. And as many of you, I'm sure likely know that, those who are arrested and, in the criminal justice system, are majority Black and brown folks. So thinking about, who's being represented, in terms of the artist in this painting. So that is to start us off thinking about, why this painting. And then what we did for our session, it was a 2-hour session. And for the most part, it broke out into the first hour and the second hour. The first hour we spent in the galleries looking at this work of art. And then the second hour was responding to the work of art by making in our studios. And the way that we worked was to begin with a really open-ended conversation where participants were bringing in their thoughts, their ideas, their personal histories to this work of art. We sat with stools, and usually we spent about 50 minutes just really investigating this artwork. And, for the most part, it was the voices of the participants rather than Blue, our teaching artist. And what he did was to facilitate that conversation and to cultivate, connections between what folks were saying and the artwork. And, some of the things, so then what we would do is Blue was interested in creating, for folks to create some kind of artwork that was in direct response to their experience and also to the artwork. And so I'm going to, if you could go to the next slide, Sadiq. And so this is one of the works of art that was created, and it was created collaboratively. So the way Blue had us work was at the end of our conversation, he would ask folks to focus on one figure. And he'd let them know that, what we were going to do was we were going to challenge the narrative. So also thinking about, their arrest experience and challenging maybe what they had internalized about that experience. So challenging that narrative and the narrative around the criminal justice. And so to focus on one of the figures and that, in some way we would be shifting the narrative, changing it. So they would spend time sketching in the galleries, one of the figures, and then we would come back down to the studio and we had oil pastels. So Blue was able to incorporate some technique, share some techniques about how to work with oil pastels. And to, it wasn't about replicating the figure. It was about taking figures that resonated with them from the artwork and changing or shifting them in some way. Then we would have folks cut out their figures if they chose. And then he would invite folks to bring them up to a wall that we had. And he would choose somebody and say, okay, you're going to be the curator here. And so folks would, put one artwork up, then the next, and then eventually everybody's voices were incorporated and would say, no, actually move this one a little bit to the right, a little bit farther to the left, etc., so that the work was created with everybody's voices involved. And one thing that we had folks do when we were analyzing Bob Thompson's work was before we told them the title of the work, which really didn't come until the end, we asked folks to work in small groups and come up with their own title for the work. And so then we paralleled that in the art making experience. So once we had decided, and once the group had decided, okay, this is the composition that we want, we said, okay, what title would you give it? And so they would work together to create a title. And so this one is called New Beginnings. And here are some of the quotes from our participants. We would ask them, we never ask them to talk about their arrest experience. It's not a group therapy situation. We're not social workers. But the space does provide, a moment, 2 hours of dialogue and intimacy with each other. And we said, okay, we're not going to ask you to talk about the experience, but you're all here because of your arrest experience. So in what way, in what connections do you see between this experience and that? And here are some of the quotes that folks shared. I didn't want this experience to be my identity. And after this, I feel like I can leave it behind me. I feel like I was given a second chance. I came here and I was so ashamed. I just wanted the whole arrest and the day to be over. When I was arrested, I was treated like shit, but you all treated us like a human. City, can you go to the next slide? And this one was called Acceptance, in parentheses, Black Power. Again, these are titles that the participants gave to these artwork, or to this collaborative artwork. And this is a quote actually from the essay that the Ajwa, who is our Deputy Director for Learning and Social Impact, and Blue and I wrote. And, one thing that we were all so grateful for and amazed by is the transformation, the transformative nature of just 2 hours. It was just 2 hours, and folks, it was palpable, the energy in the room. And so it's just been, and as this quote says, it's been an incredible opportunity to collaborate in the reimagining of what criminal justice reform can look like by emphasizing the potential for what can happen when individuals are given time for reflection, inspiration, and creative expression, as opposed to a purely punitive approach that risks bringing more and more citizens into an inequitable and ineffective criminal justice system. So thank you. And that is it for the slides, I believe, Sadiq. And Sophia, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yes. Okay. I don't think I have any slides to show, but you guys see me? Can somebody give me a thumbs up in the chat? I'm going to talk briefly about what brought me to this work. I, by God's grace, came out of really great youth programming. I was about 15 years old when I started working with a nonprofit in Brooklyn, which introduced me to murals, which introduced me to murals for social justice purposes. And I've always been grateful for that experience because it brought me to the last, almost 20 years of my life as a practicing artist and also as a facilitator. I would say that, roughly around 2014, that's when I started to really work as a teaching artist, both through Groundswell, Artistic Noise, other nonprofits that specifically work with court-involved youth. I've spent a few years before the pandemic closed down everything, facilitating art workshops on contract and volunteer basis at Rikers Island. And I've been very interested in seeing how art plays a role in the life of the young people that I've worked with. And I guess Project Reset was a great opportunity to kind of intervene. I heard at one point during a panel discussion, someone talked about, or a mother raised a question of, why does my child have to go to jail before they have an art class for the first time? They never had class in school, they never had art class anywhere else. Why is it that once they get to jail now they have this opportunity? And when I learned about Project Reset, it reminded me of that statement and just this whole notion of intervening and bringing art as a form of expression into someone's life at the point that it's needed. Even now, I'm currently studying for a master's in art therapy. And I think, now that I think about it, I think the work with Project Reset definitely pushed me to that point. And I'll talk a little bit about quickly, and someone can tell me when my time is up. I think we're running a little bit over. But I'll talk quickly also about my personal practice. So, I have done art as activism, advocacy, and also as a form of ministry. I believe I'm gifted just to serve God's people. That's literally what the last 20 years of my practice consisted of. I've worked with elders from the Black liberation movement who are politically incarcerated, even though they've maintained their innocence for 30, 40 plus years. I've worked closely with mothers who've lost children at the hands of racism and police brutality in this country. I worked with the Exonerated Five before they won their lawsuit against New York City as a way to get more people to sign petitions that they would win their lawsuit. And so I feel like I've been blessed and privileged to kind of work with different populations of people at different entry points. And Project Reset was another opportunity to do so. If I forgot anything, Lindsay, just ping me.
No, I think that's really thank you so much for sharing that the Project Reset program. What we're going to do now is we're going to shift a little bit to Maine Inside Out, and we're going to hear from Bashir, Matan, and Joe Jackson about the work that they've been doing. So Bashir Matan is a project facilitator for Maine Inside Out, and he's been working on the development of the Lewiston community site. He's also a youth organizer with Maine Youth Justice, a campaign that focuses on addressing the failures of the criminal justice system. And Bashir is a community artist who focuses on poetry and plays. Joe Jackson is the Director of Leadership Development at Maine Inside Out. He's also the Executive Director of Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition, a group that engages in direct advocacy with the Maine Department of Corrections on behalf of prisoners and their families. And another title he carries is Campaign Advisor of Maine Youth Justice, a nonpartisan campaign fighting to end youth incarceration in Maine. And he also happens to be a poet and has published work in multiple publications. So Joseph and Bashir, we'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about Maine Inside Out.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Kristen. And I'm happy to be here. Yes. Well, Maine Inside Out is an organization that I first connected with when we were doing work on the inside of Long Creek Youth Development Center using theater and art. And the theater is based on the pedagogy of Augustus Boal and Pablo Freire, and where we use theater of the oppressed, primarily image-informed theater. And we use that to raise critical consciousness in the masses. So we use art as a way of activism. And so yeah, and we've done plays and done them all over the state, but I want to pass it to Bashir. Bashir, you want to talk a little bit about our models and what we do?
I wanted to be able to turn my camera on, so could you give me a few seconds?
I can give you a few seconds. Bashir is one of ours part-time facilitators and a long-time participants, and he's been on many different stages. We have used art to really raise and highlight the issues going on at Long Creek Youth Development Center. We feel that no youth should be incarcerated, and that the trauma that youth experience in our criminal justice system is not only traumatic and harmful, but is it lasts lifelong. And so, with that being said, I see Bashir is having technical issues over there with his camera, but we do have a little short video to show you and give you an example about how we, do our art.
Is where where my old cell used to be. That white wall up there, that was the rec area. That little area right there. Those windows right beside it, on the bottom, all the way to the left, that was my room.
Resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and assault on an officer. At 14.
Overall anger problems that I feel like I just must have come up with, because I know for a fact I was a handful. I can just look back on that and like almost still feel how mad I really was.
One Class A felony, arson. Class B felony for burglary.
The kids who are in the Maine Inside Out groups at Long Creek have been working on some drumming to come open the night on November 10th.
People see what they want to, they don't understand me. Trying to let my voice out, gotta break the walls and set it free.
The way that I also got through that with the shame and being able to not be judged was put it into a play. That's what they told me, just put it into a play. You'll be able to make it so that people know what you did and that you're learning from it. It's not just, oh, he did this and he's still going down that same path. No, he's trying to fight back out of that path. He's trying to go on to a different one.
Daddy, you alright? I said I didn't need any help. Men don't need help.
Men don't need help.
And I was like inside my box. I wasn't down to do plays. I used to not think acting was, and plays were cool.
No, I got it. Okay, good. Here you go, mama.
The streets.
Struggle.
Right down here is where I've slept. This area right here was the support beam, and there was an entire shack built around this tree.
I'm 19 years old now, and at this point in my life, all I want is to be in contact with him. Where are you, Dad? Where are you, Dad? That scene really meant a lot to me at the time because I didn't have anybody that I could just go to like that. Honestly, I think I can say it because I didn't feel loved or wanted. I didn't feel like somebody was there for me to listen to me because I always had to fight to be heard.
I'm glad that I had that chance to participate when I did, because if not for the group, I feel like myself as a young youth, still am young, would probably still be on the same path that I was if I hadn't met the support system that Maine Inside Out brings to the table.
Look at the Indians, they were chewed up by a Christian man when he stepped off the boat and into the sand, sent by King Ferdinand. Genocide must have been planned because over 3 million died in their own land. And he's a hero, taking and killing for that petty De Niro. And I'm still a terrorist when I've hurting zero.
I keep all the stuff I have to myself, you know. I don't let my emotions out and talk. But whenever I come here, I feel different, you know. I let everything out, tell everybody, you know, whatever's happening, whatever's going on. This right here was probably one of the lowest points of my life, and thinking about standing in front of 500 people performing is going to be crazy. I don't know if the guy that was sitting in this a couple months ago would have even thought that that was possible.
The message that I want that the audience to receive is change is coming.
It doesn't matter what color your skin is or what's your background, we're all the same.
The message I want to put out is change starts with you. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Bashir, you ready to talk a little bit about Maine Inside Out and what it felt like to do that film and some of the other things you've been doing?
Yeah, I'd like to just introduce myself first. My name is Bashir Matan. I've been a part of Maine Inside Out since I was about 15. And I kind of like snuck in because you're supposed to be 16 or older to join. But I guess they just liked me. But yeah, I've been a part of Maine Inside Out because I've lost a lot of my friends as a youth to the system. And I felt like I needed to join the fight and change the criminal justice system. Do I need to explain Maine Inside Out still, or you're good?
Sounds good. Yeah, you can do that. You can say this what we do a little bit in kind of work.
Yeah, Maine Inside Out, we advocate for individuals and communities to imagine and embody freedom through art, advocacy, and support. So whenever our people, are down and out, they need money, this and that, we have a mutual aid fund, which gives them support. Every month they have access to $150, which, they can use to whatever emergency they have. And transformative justice is our main goal. Formerly incarcerated people lead our work. So like, I have never been incarcerated personally, but every single one of my friends basically has been incarcerated. So that's what's lead me to this work. And I just want to, help build a world where everyone belongs. And that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, our purpose is to build a world where everyone matters and belongs. And I really appreciate that Bashir lifted up the fact that, system impacted people guide our work. In order to create plays, what we do is we take people's original stories, break them down to their most basic level of a beginning, middle, and end scene. And then we weave the scenes together of many young people's different stories to create a play. For us, not only is the creation of that art a form of activism, but it's also therapeutic because there's healing in the creation of that art where, there's power in naming. And so the power that we get in naming a thing, we believe that people can heal from. And when Bashir talked a little bit about our advocacy and support model, our advocacy and support model is not just about giving out, emergency funding, but supporting people when they find themselves back in contact with the criminal justice system and many different systems. The Department of Health and Human Services is one of the systems that people get lost and trapped in. There's peer mentorship and peer aid, mutual aid that also happens in that model. And so by helping guide young people and being with them, through some of the barriers that they're going to face, and notice that many young people face tremendous barriers, especially when they're system impacted, barriers to housing, barriers to employment, barriers to almost everything, health and health security, food security, these things that are endemic and systemic and a part of the challenges young people face. And so by using art, lifting up these stories, putting a face on and a voice to the voiceless, we feel that we're going to be able to bring about the world where we see a place where there's no more need for youth prison. And I'll end with that.
Thank you so much, Joe. So Alex, if you could go ahead and if everybody could turn on their cameras, we're actually going to move to having a conversation with all of these amazing activists and artists and educators. And I have a series of questions, and it's just been really inspirational just to think about the different ways that you all give people a voice, whether it's through a theater production or through an experience where they have a voice in sharing their experience, but also kind of expressing it through art. And I'm kind of wondering, so, when you think about throughout history, like many artists and the works they've created have played a role in kind of raising awareness of social issues and been a catalyst for change. What do you think it is about art that strengthens this social justice work? And I'm just going to throw that out to everyone.
I can hop in. I think that one of the things, at least for us, I believe it is that, and it's in the pedagogy of theater, the press itself. It's like when you begin to show, the audience is not just an audience. It's hard to witness the kind of art that we share and not to, become part of it, you become an actor in it. You become part of the play itself. And by becoming part of the play itself, by beginning to not only have some empathy and understanding of what you're witnessing on stage, but the motivation to do something about it. And I think that for us, when we think about like the art we share, there's that element where the audience is not just an audience, but just another active participant that's going to be engaged in the discourse that we're highlighting.
I can jump in also. I think that one of the most important roles that the art serves as has to do with this notion of longevity. I know that I'm guilty of living in a microwave generation, and people's attention spans are not what they used to be. And so, when there's a hashtag trending and when there's news coverage and all this stuff, everyone is talking about an issue. But just because the press stops talking about it doesn't mean that it stops. And that's one thing that has even come up in conversations with moms, for example, who've lost a child due to police brutality. They'll say, it's great when we have the crowds and the whole nation is in an uproar. But at the end of the day, when the cameras go, we go back home by ourselves and we still have to deal with the loss. And so I think that art, whether it be on canvas, whether it be through performance, whether it be through public art, it helps to elongate our attention span and how we address the issue, not just today, but over time, how it's looked at a decade from now when my son, is an adult. So that's one thing. It serves as a backdrop. It provides a visual to what a lot of people are just internalizing, especially when it comes to oppressed peoples, but also it extends the voice of the movement essentially as well.
Yeah. And, kind of going along with that, I know you all have been doing this work for a while. Have there ever been any kind of surprises in this work, like things that have happened that you weren't expecting and that, I don't know, maybe was a really wonderful surprise of something that's happened through this work?
I think I alluded to this when I was sharing, but when we were in the planning process for Project Reset, we were super excited. We really wanted to do it, but we also knew, okay, this is a 2-hour program. What is it that can really can transform? Can you have a transformative experience in 2 hours? And it just blew us away about how much it did affect people on a deep level. I think that it was the space of being able to be in dialogue, but, and putting the artwork is the anchor. And so you don't necessarily have to talk from the first person, but you can then talk about experiences, and then it just creates this natural empathy that happens between each other. And then the space and the time to just enjoy material. that was magic. Like, and so that the arts, you know, in as little as 2 hours can really deeply resonate and create that transformative experience.
Joe, do you have chances to kind of talk back with audiences when you present like theater productions?
Most definitely, as part of it, we began to engage with the audience and establish a dialogue. I think one of the most surprising things for us is that going to different schools and universities, into our state house, including into the Senate, that we've actually been able to make reforms through legislation has followed, some of the issues we've raised in our artwork. Just this past year, there was a bill passed to seal records for juveniles, set a minimum age. We didn't have a minimum age for juveniles in our state, and through our art, we were able to raise that issue. The other thing, I think that we had our youth facility, which has been serving over 200 kids, the population has now been reduced to 30 kids. And I think that's because of the art and us highlighting that many of the young people that find themselves locked up behind the bars didn't need to be there. And then lastly, there's a great deal of conversation in our state about what does reinvestment in our communities look like to serve young people. And I think that all of these things that we're seeing happening in our state and the conversations that are happening in our state house was brought about because we were able to kind of like pull back the curtains on a lot of stuff that was happening with young people by getting up on stage and just sharing those stories. So for me, I think that was surprising. And I think the surprising part is not that I didn't believe it would happen, but that it's starting to happen so quickly, And so I think that part, we have a bill that got through the House and our Senate to close the youth facility. Unfortunately, our governors didn't, agree with that. But just that, being able to get to a place where that part of your messaging is being resonated, so we got it through both bodies of our House and Senate. For me, it's just really surprising in our first year of trying. So that's what I think is the process.
Because it really feels like, I think both of your programs, one of the interesting things is you really give voice to people who are directly in the system, wherever they are, but it gives them a way to really empower, which, yeah. And so kind of thinking about that, so you've got these great programs. Do you have kind of hopes for the future? Like, what would you like to see kind of expand or begin that would really just think about that relationship between arts and criminal justice system?
Well, definitely. Like as I indicated, I really feel like that art is a way is a therapeutic in the form that we can use it as a tool of healing. When we're thinking about our criminal justice systems, that regardless of who enters it, it doesn't matter if it's the person that's being incarcerated or in there, they're entering an environment that's filled with trauma. And so, where does that, how do you heal that? And I think one of the ways that we use art to do that is like through the power of naming. I think the place where I like to take it a little bit is I love to take it into schools. I love to use theater of the oppressed with younger kids, maybe middle school and elementary class level schools. So, using our theater games, using the art of storytelling to begin to start identifying, what's going on in school where we get so many of these young people that are dropping out, especially in our state. We have a lot of suspensions in our state. And so what's leading to those suspensions of those Black and brown bodies from school? And then creating that pipeline that, where they're going directly almost into the criminal justice system just from that point. So I think that, and we have some ways of thinking about how to do that. And one of the ways we're doing it is through what we're calling leadership development of system impacted people. I'm probably like the head of that, the director of that. Bashir is like one of our young leaders, but you know, I can be able to talk to the young kid, but Bashir might be able to, and then we can be able to utilize that art and build the relationships needed to begin to understand what's happening with young folks, so we can interrupt this system that seems to be kind of swallowing up young people.
I can also jump in really quickly. I think that these types of programs need to be extended beyond just those who are personally affected. As far as individuals go, I remember when I had a family member be incarcerated and spend a couple of years at Rikers, be sentenced for 10 years upstate. And that circumstance did not just affect her, affected a whole family. And so I think that it is important to have moments of healing, moments of confronting what has happened to the individual. But I also think that it affects more than just, you know, that person. It affects their children, it affects their loved ones, their partners. And so I would love to see programming that also touches on their environment, their familiar familial ecosystem, and also helps those people heal, because we all go through it. Like, if you've ever been on a visit, you feel like you yourself were in there, even though you were only there for a few hours, and that's just the reality of the situation. So I think that that's something that should definitely, or would definitely be a goal for the future, especially with parents and children that kind of go through that. You know, there's children that have witnessed their father get arrested. There's children that have seen some things. And what about them? So that's just something else that I would add.
Well, and you know, in the Brooklyn area, you all already have kind of a collaboration. Do you see like future programs happening with the community, kind of expanding for families? I'm just curious.
I think from my perspective, I can share quickly is that, you know, I hope that that is the case for different age groups, and for folks that are court involved, that are not court involved. And I think, you know, to your earlier question around why folks are like responsive to art is art is a universal language, right? And so we consume it daily. It's in our fashion, it's in our architecture, it's like how we set up our furniture in our living room, right? And so when we see certain things, you know, it invites the question of what does this mean, or why, or what is what's being communicated. And so it invites those questions, that opens up that dialogue. And I think that that's why art is you know, is accessible to everyone, and really calling on other art makers, institutions to really come to the forefront to open their doors for folks that may have been intimidated to walk through them.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add on, if that's okay. I know we're running towards the end of time, but yeah, just building off what Sadiq said, I think that, you know, we are complex humans, right? Humans carry so many layers to us. And I think that there's so much power in art and being able to also have so many layers and entry points and imagine possibilities. And I think that's where we're at right now with the criminal justice system, where it's the opposite, right? That's really about the oppression of those possibilities. And so I think what I would hope, you know, we could see, you know, there's the logistics of, we've got this, you know, one program, there's so many things happening and possibilities, you know, structurally for us in partnership with Project Reset and Center for Court Innovation, and more like, how can we then also imagine other alternatives and possibilities for programming for the criminal justice system, for, you know, what it means to center empathy in relationship to yeah, any entry point around court involved young people and people of all ages. And you know, we've one thing we have been working on is a toolkit to, you know, with the Center for Court Innovation to document their work with us, and also with the new museum, and even just in those conversations with other museums, which, as Sadiq mentioned, museums also are an institution that holds a lot of, barriers for accessibility for a lot of people. And so, just being able to see and share some of the work and have other institutions also imagine, possibilities within their work, I think that's super exciting for us to also break open, what the responsibility and roles of museums also in this work as public institutions.
Yeah, that's so great. I can't wait to get that toolkit. We didn't have a lot of question and answers, but somebody who did talked about some different programs that we have here at Colby, like the fact of the Waterville South End, the Hardy Girls, and hoping that the downtown space might be, a place where maybe some of these things can happen. Maybe it moves away from maybe the intimidation of a museum a little bit as we at the museum kind of grow and expand. And, I also just wanted to share for the community, the museum has been working with Art Kits for All with Waterville Creates and a lot of other community partners. And one of the things we did do in September was we created art kits for incarcerated individuals and their families. So, and we hope that that's the beginning of kind of a long collaboration as a way to, as Sophia mentioned, really connect with families, not just individuals, but really expand that circle of being able to heal and talk together and move forward. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for sharing what you're doing. It's so exciting to hear what's happening in Maine. It's so exciting to hear what's happening in museums too. And it's really inspiring, I know, for myself and for all of us. And just thank you so much to the audience for being part of this program. We talked a little bit about Bob Thompson, but we'll talk even more about Bob Thompson with our program on Monday. It's about Titian, Thompson, and myth making. So I hope you'll join us for that virtual program. And then there's another program even after that. So on November 3rd at the New York Studio School, and all of that kind of registration information is available on our website. And yeah. I'm just going to say thank you all, the participants, the presenters, and the audience. So appreciate it and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so much. This was really fascinating.
Thanks so much for having us.
I can't wait for that toolkit. When do you think that is coming? Sure. Yeah.
We'll let you know.
Very soon. Yes. Yeah. It's
That sounds great.
within the next couple of weeks, certainly.
That sounds great. Okay. Well, thanks again. And I'll talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.